to share. I think it's worked on my end now with the PowerPoint functionality that I was hoping to have, and I have my notes up in front of me on my little laptop screen. Can everybody see that sort of blue screen with NIR renewals and my name on it?
Yeah, that's looking good.
If I scroll left and right, yeah, that's doing its thing as expected.
Well, I've got a blue screen,
Can you see that next
title
one?
screen. No, it's still on the blue screen for me.
Dear, oh dear. I don't know why this isn't working. 2 seconds. Maybe I will do this instead. Does that work?
Still got the blue title screen.
Right. I feel like I've moved it along.
I think it's set that we can
I've just
but I don't know
clicked
that
to the
you
bottom.
can.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a pain, I know, but I can move the slides along for you, Alastair, if you like.
Yeah, okay. How about that? Can I does that work now?
Oh yeah, that's done it.
Right, super. So that should be okay then. So all being well, you have the slides on the screen, and I have my notes in front of me, and we can get going. Happy days. Okay. First things first, thank you very much indeed, Les, for inviting me and for having me to the PWI Chester section. I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity to present on Northern Ireland Railways and the type of renewals work that we're getting up to. This is the third time I'll have been doing this presentation, so I'm getting good mileage out of it. I presented it to the Edinburgh section when they invited me over, and I've done a little internal lunch and learn with Atkins Realis with the P-Way practice. So I should be fairly polished, but we'll just see how it goes in the end. So this presentation, the topic of today is just to go through a little bit of some of the work that we've been doing in recent years in Northern Ireland Railways as part of our track renewals program, and give you a little bit of background as to what we do, who we are, how we do it, and how we go about that. It's sort of my experience that lots of people are maybe a little bit of aware of what we get up to in Northern Ireland on the sort of larger projects. I think maybe some of the stuff I'm talking about today, certainly for the Belfast Transport Hub, Grand Central Station, would be maybe familiar to you. But some of the kind of domestic renewals, kind of campaign renewals type work, it's interesting and good permanent way work that's definitely worth presenting, and I think would be good just to highlight just to the wider UK audience. So if I move a slide on. So just very quickly, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail for an about me page. This always feels a wee bit like sort of tooting your own horn when you're giving this context to people who you're presenting to, but I'll maybe only spend a little bit of time on it. So my name is Alastair Hume. I am a chartered engineer with the Permanent Way Institution with 10 years experience in track and civils. So I started out in 2014, working in civils design, slowly moved my way towards doing track design, in between Belfast and Manchester, and I've now sort of settled quite firmly in the sort of design side, back in Atkins Realis in design after a stint with the client in 2019. So my background is track design initially, certainly then moving into design assurance and engineering management when I worked for the client, with a little bit of construction support and asset management being developed in conjunction with the maintenance team when I worked for Translink. Currently now back in Atkins Realis in Belfast, I'm working to develop the capability of the track team in there. Currently it's a team of one, but we are working away and bidding and developing relationships in order to try and build the capability and to work for our key client Translink out of Belfast office. There's sort of a handful of pictures there on there. There's one of my big baldy head. There's one of the Belfast Transport Hub Grand Central Station, which we're going to get to in a minute. Back when I worked for ARP, that was the sort of key landmark project that I was working on for pretty much most of my time there. It's probably one of the proudest engineering projects I've worked on because I've had a lot of impact on that one for quite a long time. And then just very quickly on the right hand side, that's a little selfish and very proud picture. That's me getting my C-Edge from Joan Harry, who's the PWI membership secretary, who's also one of us from Northern Ireland. That was quite a special moment for me. So there you go. That's just a little bit about me. If I zoom the slides on, you can see. So that's me, and this is Translink. So TransLink, as a little bit of background for those who don't know, is the owner and operator of the infrastructure and the public transport in Northern Ireland. So I was having a bit of a think, and I think the closest parallel TransLink can be drawn with TransLink is Transport for London, I think. They own the infrastructure and they also maintain the infrastructure and they also own and potentially operate the rolling stock on it. I think that's a broadly correct comparison. I might be challenged on that. Somebody clever might tell me I'm wrong. And so TransLink are similar to that in that they own and operate the rolling stock and then they also maintain the track. But on top of that, then they are also the public transport provider for the whole of Northern Ireland. So you can see there, you've got the track, which is the top left, one of our CAF trains for the NIR network. Top right is the Belfast City Centre public transport city bus, now metro network, and on the right of that picture is the gold, no, sorry, not the gold, the purple flexi bus is the Belfast Glider, which is our new rapid transport system. Bottom left hand side is the cross-border enterprise service, which we share with Irish Rail. Half the sets owned and maintained in the south, and half up here in Northern Ireland. And then the bottom right hand side is the sort of coach network that is also Gold Line, also implemented by TransLink as part of the Northern Ireland Transport Holding Company, which is the main body that owns sort of the corporation that kind of owns all of the parts of TransLink and these sort of franchises, if you like. What I wanted to tell you to sort of start off as a little bit of background to the network was a story of network utilization. So if you have a look at where we sit in terms of route map, I nicked these values from the UK from the ORR rail statistics from 2023, and I nicked the stats from Northern Ireland Railways from the Public Transport Statistics Office in Northern Ireland. What I'm trying to show here is that I think England's got obviously the largest amount of miles, but also a very large amount of journeys. But if you compare the actual journeys with route miles, the usability of the network comparatively for our wee small network, the story I'd like to tell here is that it's very good. So there is, I think, what have we got there? The 0.04 value compared to the 1.153 of England. I'm punching above our weight. Sorry, 0.59 there for Northern Ireland. Punching a little bit above our weight in terms of network usability. We have a consistent customer base in that we have people who are willing to use public transport and happy to use public transport, and we feel we can see that's growing year on year. So I haven't got the numbers for the last year. 2023-24, 17 million is the ridership we have. I think that was the most recent one, and we're sort of getting up back to our pre-COVID levels. There is a bit of challenge on this one in that we don't have any freight in Northern Ireland, so all of our network is all used by all passengers. So there's going to be route mileage in England that's only used for freight, and it's going to throw these metrics off. But I think that the critical takeaway is that we've got a network that is well used and I believe well liked by the customer base in Northern Ireland. So if we have a look here, you can see the background of what we have in terms of our asset bank. We've got 300 plus linear miles of track. It's 220 route miles or corridor miles of track. 54 stations, 4 of which are terminal stations in Bangor, in Belfast Grand Central, Portrush, and in what's the last one? Derry. We've got over 270 point ends. That includes those are individual point ends, so that includes turnouts and crossovers. And over 120 level crossings and user work crossings, including accommodation crossings across the country. We've got quite a number of those, certainly in the north of the country. The maximum speed of our track is a 90 mile an hour, and our track is not electrified. Oh, what happened there? Everything okay? Can you still see the presentation? My screen just changed.
Yeah, I've lost it as well.
No. It's gone.
Is it gone? Right, let me try and see if we can get it back. That's encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, it's back, Alastair, for me.
Okay, thanks
Yeah.
everybody. Not quite sure what happened there, but well, we'll go on from there. Let me see, just get the next one. Okay, so on the slide here, you can see the main areas that we have lines in Northern Ireland. You can see they got the line from Belfast running to the north to Larne, to the major port. The line then running from Belfast to Antrim up towards the north of the country, towards Portrush and Londonderry. The line to the east heading to Bangor, and then the line to the south heading to Dublin and the Republic of Ireland.
Sorry to
What you do?
interrupt, Alistair. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's just me, but I'm stuck on the TransLink assets screen. I don't know if
Oh,
anybody
hold
else.
on.
Yeah, so am I.
Oh, apologies, guys.
I thought it was just me then.
Can you see the
Oh,
lovely
that's
map
it.
that I've got?
Yeah, got it
Okay,
now. Yeah.
super, guys. Thank you.
I haven't. I've done wrong.
Let me just toggle it forward and backward. How's that? Can you see the map?
Yeah, map's
No.
back. Yeah.
Oh. Why am I seeing different?
Oh, it's okay for me, Rob.
I
You
suppose
may
is there,
need to sync with presenter, Rob.
yeah, there's maybe a button that says you could sync with me.
Magnify view slides. Yeah. I can't find it today. No, I've used it before. It's bizarre.
Do you want me to
Well, don't
go
stop
on?
on
You
my
can you can
behalf.
you
Do you
can
want to
have
carry
a
on and
go
I'll-
in the background and see if it
Yeah,
pops back in.
I'll try and figure it out.
So if I go to the next slide, then you can see the schematic of the network. You can see here the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, I suppose that they've called here. It's a little bit sneaky in that on the left-hand side in green they've got a Portadown or a Belfast to Newry line, which they've separated from the Belfast to Dublin line. That's not really the case because that is one track corridor that goes all the way to Dublin that just happens to be in line with Newry, Portadown, and Lisburn on the left-hand side there. So there's the Dublin Road to the left-hand side, on the north of the country up to Coleraine, to Portrush and Derry, to the kind of north and to the east into Lower Larne, and then on the east towards Bangor. And you can see here we've quite that Translink has quite strategically placed some. Oh no, someone's taking control.
God, was that me? If it was, it wasn't intended to.
That's okay. I'm going to take back control there, and then hopefully I'll stay on this schematic slide. Okay. As I was saying, then, so Translink have placed some quite strategic airplane markers here at Belfast and Antrim. What is actually quite clear if you live in Northern Ireland or have experienced the rail and airport travel in Northern Ireland, is that we don't have a real direct connection at Antrim to the airport. The station is nearby, but it's not connected in a similar way that maybe your Manchester airport or your Birmingham would be. And also the station down at Sydenham here is the station that's closest to Belfast City Airport. However, I think they haven't decided to put a plane there because it's a little bit disingenuous due to the large walk to the concourse. So that's one to be aware of, is that it is reasonably well connected, but the airports to the rail is maybe something to have a little bit of work on. Just to give you an idea then of the structure of the organization, I'm going to focus mostly on the infrastructure and projects directorate, which is where I worked when I was a Permanent Way project engineer for Permanent Way Department. This sort of is it's sort of comparable maybe to INP and Network Rail, but maybe not. INP, as far as I know, looks after infrastructure and projects, but doesn't look after the maintenance side of the business. Infrastructure and projects in Northern Ireland Railways looks after maintenance and the project side. So if you could see here, the head of infrastructure and projects, head of engineering. Underneath engineering then are the maintainers for the various organizations for S&T structures and Permanent Way, and then also representatives then for track engineering, who will then input in conjunction with the head of renewals and the program managers and project managers who deliver the capital projects. So they're responsible for the delivery of the capital projects. Discipline's main responsibility is for maintaining and operating the railway. And as PE, I was sitting here underneath the track engineering manager. So I work with a very talented team, lots of lovely people, guided by very sort of highly experienced and well-intended people with real ownership for the railway. So a really nice place to work. So the approach to capital work and renewals. So Translink have what they call a capital plan, which is a little bit like a broad brush work bank. So it details the core concepts of projects that are required, taking into consideration the stakeholders within the company and outside the company. Currently, it's defined in around 10 years in advance for both projects and programs of work. And this is having scopes that are sort of broadly defined at that sort of 10, sort of 8, 9, 10 year part, but then scopes of work that are more sort of closely or more detailed defined at the kind of 3, 4 year mark. So in terms of the projects and how they work, they're incepted based on a need for an intervention. Sometimes it's identified by the disciplines internally within permanent way structures or S&T. Sometimes it's identified externally from the department or an operational need. Currently, it's mostly for enhancements and renewals at this stage. So the department underneath the infrastructure and projects director to the left, the person who's in charge of that, who's Rory, I think now, is the head of renewals. And so if you're the head of renewals, every nail's a hammer. If you're sorry, trying to get that right. If you're a hammer, everything's a nail. So if you're a head of renewals and you do renewals, you go and do renewals. So the concepts of heavy refurbishment, heavy maintenance, and refurb are sort of slowly working their way into the thinking and being developed now after a little bit of encouragement from my old boss, who was the head of Permanent Way, who's now the head of engineering. You can see then we've got P3O controls. That's just a little bit of background about how the project management procedures work. There's sort of, I've had in recent days come into contact with the Irish Rail project management procedures, and they're not dissimilar. It's a set of forms and formal processes in order to ask the department for money to go away and do the capital work bank that's being used. To get into that a little bit, so I think it's one of the interesting differences is that the funding is assigned for projects on a project by project basis. This is with an effort to tightly control infrastructure funding. So, for example, it's a good and a bad thing. So, for example, we get money when we need it, but there's maybe sometimes not as much opportunity to play some tunes on the needs for intervention throughout that because of the fact that the projects are funded individually. I have a lot of text on this in my notes. It's maybe a little bit to get into. Suppose to give you a little bit of information on that one. Say, for example, and we did this when I was with TransLink. We have the internal project of a program of level crossing refurbishments that we wanted to undertake, but due to the fact that we had to let them on a yearly by year basis, there wasn't really an opportunity for us to engage the same supplier from a design point of view in order to make the efficiencies and lessons learned, because we had to ask for the money on a yearly basis. And it's different pots of money as well. So in slightly different to maybe in a network rail control period. And Ryan can keep me right on this one. He was the boy working for Network Rail in Atkins Realis in Glasgow. Is that you can't take, for example, 2 S&C renewals in 2024 and say you'll do 4 S&C refurbishments in 2025 by playing tunes on that pot of money. We have to define the benefits that we want to achieve, implement the project process to achieve those benefits, and go away and actually define those benefits and realize those benefits as part of the project with the pot of money that we're given. We're not allowed to go away and sort of play tunes on the money that we have, and that's quite a challenging thing. A pro for that is that the budget is controlled and earmarked. There's lots of project certainty on that, but similarly, the con is that we can't go and play tunes on it. The other small thing to highlight is that the sort of project processes, I think it would be sort of prudent to highlight the timeframes for this. So currently having a look at what we've delivered when I was with TransLink, the general timeframe between the inception of a project where we have identified a need and to the handback of that project into maintenance has been in between 3 and 4 years. So it's not good, it's not bad. We're from an asset bank that has been in decline for the last number of years, that has been sort of potentially underfunded, some in around 2008, along with lots of the world. It just means that we have to sort of do an awful lot of renewals in order to catch up. And what it also means is that we're getting to the point in our journey where potentially the lessons learned and the implementation of network rail processes like speed and pace could start to be something that we think about in order to do the right amount of design and project management for the right scope of works at the right time, that kind of thing. So if I go to the next slide, yeah, this should be pretty familiar for anybody who works or delivers capital projects or capital work bank. Just thought it might be prudent to highlight to sort of give you an idea of what we do and how it's undertaken. So the first step there, identifying the need for a project. The need is identified, and whether that be by the individual disciplines or again externally by operations, that's defined. And a broad scope is suggested. So it could be, we're getting wild RCF on that curve, let's go and mill it. The stakeholder requirements are identified, so that tends to go around the houses and say, well, if you're milling, what are we going to do? Well, it's a track job. It's probably going to be track only, but sometimes that then, especially for renewals work, other disciplines will have problem statements or problem assets in that same area, and there is an opportunity to make efficiencies and then in delivering those projects or those parts of work at the same time. After we get the stakeholder requirements and scope confirmed and go through all of the process to write the documentation, we have a consultant appointment, and that happens quite early in our process. They are appointed basically at sort of grip 2, really, I suppose, grip 1, grip 2, and we use them as any CPM and as basically asset engineering for us due to the lack of resource internally in order to undertake those roles. And so consultants are used with the capital funding available to go and do our asset condition surveys, our site walks, our early feasibility, and to help us define the option selection and scopes of work. That's a great thing for consultants because they get to come on board and they get to understand our network. The consultants are really very good at understanding CapEx cost and capital intervention, but it's maybe less good at understanding OpEx, which is quite a challenge when we try to work on this to develop the documentation and the processes needed to get to where we want to be. The design and design assurance process. So yeah, very similar to sort of working in infrastructure and network rail. We have Form As, Form Bs, AFCs, and we implement the design assurance process off the back of that in order to ensure the design is integrated and safe and buildable. We appoint a contractor. Of late, that has been Babcock for permanent way projects in Northern Ireland is the principal contractor with an 8-year framework since I think about 2015 or thereabouts. 15, 16, can't quite remember. We have a number of local tier 2 suppliers who are also involved in undertaking permanent way works in the form of McLaughlin Harvey, Graham's, and FP McCann. With regard to that contractor appointing, they're generally appointed at the end of GRIP for ECI in order to get a cost comparison for construction in order to form the economic appraisal. Then we go into construction. Construction is undertaken broadly 2 ways. Again, not dissimilar to undertaking construction in network rail infrastructure. Either we do disruptive possessions at Easter or Christmas time usually, which are prioritized. However, the current approach by TransLink is to try and avoid those particular possessions because those are the times that the public want to travel. So it used to be, Christmas blockade, Christmas and New Year, we'll close the track, we'll do all the big work that we need to do. More recently, people want to get into town and get into the Christmas shopping and get into the sales, and so that is a sort of shift in ridership that is then forcing a different methodology for construction. And as a result, we're doing an awful lot more midweek night work. So we can do midweek night for capitalized maintenance, sort of campaign renewals. Being a owner operator, we have a good relationship with operations, and we're able to do things like cancel the first and last train on certain nights in order to increase our possession lengths. And we can also make use of the longer possession on a Sunday because we have sort of later trains running on Sunday morning. And then off the back of that, then handover, AMP forms, everything to get back into maintenance. That's just the sort of standard sort of stuff, entry into service. It'd be prudent just to have a quick look at the asset wheel. This is it's probably not a new concept, but a bit of a new sort of way to present this um, for Translink. This was sort of developed by Mervyn McCollum, who's my old boss, who's now the head of engineering, to kind of indicate about what we should do, maintain, refurbish, renew, enhance, and where we should try and target our funding and our intervention. Go to the next one. So critical differences then. This is quite an interesting one just to get into a little bit. So I've highlighted a handful of things that maybe are you would be not fully aware of if you were a permanent way engineer in the UK or in England and Scotland. So our gauge is different. We have 1600mm broad gauge. So that is applicable for a plain line and an S&C. And I like to think that we got there with the NR60 approach, which is the same gauge in plain line and S&C. We got there a wee bit before you boys. We had 1600 in both a long time ago. The S&C geometry, it's a little bit different to the network rail approach. However, it is still in SEN 56. We don't have that 3 mil difference at the twist between the 1432 and 1435. It's the same throughout, but we do have very, I suppose the word custom and challenging geometry past the well at the common crossing. And I think I'll leave it at that. You can come and talk to me about that. I developed an S&C library for Bentley Railtrack for Northern Ireland Railways turnouts. And I think, yeah, we can get into that, but it's I could speak about that for a little while. Off the back of that, then I think the thing to highlight is the maximum speed that we can take through turnouts is 50 mile an hour. There's no advantage to us using anything greater than an F switch due to the geometry at the crossing. Just to highlight track categories then, due to our lack of freight on our network, and even though we do have quite a large amount of commuter trains, the commuter trains have quite a low axle weight. As a result, our track categories are very low. The highest track cat we have is 3. We don't approach the 2 or the 1 or the 1A due to the combination of both speed and tonnage. Due to the gauge that we have, 1600, if you go back and do your calc from the permanent way miles book, you can find out that our equilibrium constant is slightly different. So it's 13.14 as opposed to 11.82. Similar to that then, some key differences in bogey centers, where we have the 12.2 that you would use for your virtual transitions and your minimum bogey centers in network rail infrastructure. Our bogey centers are defined by our loading gauge, which is a lower limit of 13.4. In terms of gauging, this is a great one I always like to highlight. Our gauging specialist in Atkins Realis is like a dog with two tails when he hears this, is that we have a very simplified approach to gauging compared to undertaking gauging for network rail infrastructure. We have 3 gauges, potentially a 4th, and 2 steps. That's it. That's all we have to work with. The CAF trains all have 1 step, the enterprise trains another, and we have 3, and again, a 4th one potentially being worked in. Loading gauges in order to prove our clearances to structures. Our platform offsets are slightly different, so we work to a 760.915 as opposed to a 730.915. That's just, I think it's due to a function of the wider gauge and potentially a slightly not narrower train, but potentially I'm not really quite sure on that one where the background for that one is. Our position of safety is slightly different in that it's 1.5 throughout as opposed to a 1.25 moving to 1.5 due to line speed. And the last one there on that list is just we are still utilizing red zone working as a safe system of work in Northern Ireland. I know Nick Millington is quite keen on sort of eliminating that, but we have I think we have quite a good, quite knowledgeable workforce and safety staff, and no real issues with undertaking that type of work so far. So I'm going to get into the sort of specific renewal challenges for undertaking work in Northern Ireland before I get into some of the projects that we actually deliver. So similar to maybe some of our colleagues who work in Scotland, single line working is a big challenge. So we do have quite a large amount of double track, but we have a large amount of single track, certainly with more to the north of the country. And as with most railways, we have some highly constrained cesses with access points maybe not potentially as frequently as we would like. So it's quite challenging for planning work. What's been quite good is that the Babcock staff that we've had working on our infrastructure projects coming from the Rail Systems Alliance Scotland and working up in the Highlands and Islands and the back of beyond in Scotland are very used to undertaking work in this kind of way. And so logistically have a good understanding of how to undertake that work. Next challenge is the limitation on railway plants. So we have six ballast wagons or hoppers to cover the whole network, and generally that covers maintenance only, as we don't like to use them on renewals to contractors due to liability. We've got two tampers. We've got a Placer 08 and a compact. We have the ability to undertake 4-point lining, but don't ask me if anybody knows how to use it. In our tamping workbank and our tamping crew, we've got some very well experienced, very competent staff. We've got a boy who's now, I think, we like to joke, we've got 7.5 tamper men. This is the half. He's on part-time stage retirement now, and he's 40 years working on the tamping with the British Empire Medal for services to permanent way. So he's been at it a long time, and he can make the tamper dance. However, they are quite old machines, and they're approaching their last refurbishment, end of life upgrades. Just as an aside to that, then we have one Windhoff MPV, which is the ability to have change the modules in the back of it in order to undertake both weed splaying and low adhesion sandite application. And that sort of typifies the Northern Ireland Railways approach to sort of plant, which is to have machines that can do multiple tasks and keep a small team busy for a longer amount of time. In saying that, ballast cleaning is something that we are going to engage with. We've been buying a cleaner for a little while now. It's borrowed one from Irish Rail for some critical tests a little while ago, and sort of in the process of procuring one at the minute. Just as a note, I suppose there is Irish gauge care-off trains on the island. Currently, I think being approved and on the network for Irish Rail. We're unlikely to maybe get a go with that unless we ask Joe and Cathal some interesting questions. But it's just one to note. It's quite a good development for the island as a whole, if not for Northern Ireland Railways currently. And this has the impact of having an impact on construction delivery. So S&C is all built in the whole. We don't have the ability to put it in as modular panels. Most of the ballast that we would take in to site would either be run out with RVs and trailers or in 20-ton lorries, and a little bit of a kind of constraint on the tamping, and that the machines are so old that the front offsets and the level correction are delivered to it via a floppy disk, which is quite a challenging thing to find adapters and all that stuff when we started to use it. In terms of the supply chain, it is limited, but it is good. So we've got generally very good, competent, skilled, and knowledgeable staff who know the network and know what they're doing. We have some good sort of tier one contracting partners in Babcock, and some other partners in the kind of more heavy civils in Graham's, McLaughlin's, and Farron's on the network. They all have internal staff, but some more than others. But they all lean on their own supply chain for railway-specific labour, plant, and machinery. And we have two main suppliers of that, which is OTT for labour and safety competency, and RPS for plant. And as a result, sometimes that limits the number and complexity of the type of work that we can implement on our network at any one time, because we've got more than one contractor, or sometimes even one contractor competing for the same resource in a number of locations. Sometimes a little bit challenging. We have made use of Scottish or English resource in things like Ready Power or PodTrack or DJ Civils, but we do pay for it off the back of that. Similar with diggers or RVs, there's 24 available at any one time, so we need to prioritize the work when we come into doing that type of work. And while limited, the growth is occurring sort of naturally. It's kind of an organic growth at the minute. So OTT, the labour company, are branching out into training and competence. And RPS, who is the digger company, are branching out into MUPS for inspection. And I've had great success in the tin bin branded RV mounted railvac. Last one there is on product approval. I don't want to get into that, but it's really interesting. Is that usually we can use products that are approved for Network Rail in Northern Ireland Railway for a given value of approved. So things that impact gauge that don't match our gauge can't be used, and things that are interoperable as per the European TSIs provide a little bit of a challenge. As an example on that one, we had a project on a viaduct where it would have been a no-brainer to specify composite sleepers, and we worked in conjunction with the CSM approvals and a consultant at Ricardo Rail to try and get them through the internal and external change management process with NOBOs and DEBOs. And it turned out that due to its interoperability, where we weren't able to use information or data from Network Rail in order to prove that it was acceptable for use in Northern Ireland due to the difference in gauge. And that was a real challenge because we were quite keen on getting that environmental sort of points, if you like, for implementing that type of sleeper, but we're just unable to do so due to the timeframes on that. I think we would have had to put them in somewhere and run an awful lot of trains over them in order to get them approved, as opposed to using well-established data from just across the shuck. And the final one, just the project timeframes. I think we touched on that previously. It's not maybe as big a deal as I made it out to be. It's 3 to 4 years is pretty standard from inception to handback. But sometimes it's a bit of a challenge within that 3-year time frame, potentially due to the risk held by the maintenance organization that things like putting emergency speed restrictions on may be required during that 3-4 year time period, which only proves to highlight the importance of doing the work that we have put up for renewal or enhancement. So if I just go to the next slide, I've got 2 projects I want to share with you quickly to give you a bit of an idea of what we get up to. So the first of which is Lagan Junction. So Lagan Junction was the first project I worked on when I started working for TransLink after I came from ARP as a designer. It's part of the first phase of the CATR, the Central Area Track Renewals Project. So Mott MacDonald was commissioned to undertake a feasibility study on this one in 2018, I think. They went and did the project manager for this one was quite clever. He said, go you and do the full feasibility for all of this, and then we would define individual sort of grip 4 plus scopes off the back of it. So they went and did that sort of feasibility for the full length of the central area. This was the highest priority site identified off the back of that one. This where it's sat in Belfast is a highly critical kind of golden asset. That sort of picture that we have here, this is the line, the double junction towards Bangor to the east of the country. And this line takes everything to the north of the country up towards our main depot at Fort William, and then out towards then Larne, Coleraine, Derry, and Portrush. So if you think trains to Belfast, trains to the south to this way, but trains pretty much everywhere else up this way. So it's quite a critical junction in our network. And as a result of that, it was quite a high priority on the TransLink capital plan to go out and get this addressed. It exists on a piece of track which is in our highest track category, which is 3, and as a result, experiences our highest amount of traffic and tonnage. So I can give you a bit of background on what the issues were, what was wrong. So this is quite an old layout. It was put in when the Cross Harbour Rail Link was established a long time ago now, 25 plus years old. It's a custom layout, both in the fact that it uses the subtly different gauge. I think it's 1597 gauge on this one, as opposed to the 1600 plain line. That's how old it was. It was back when we thought we still needed that difference in the twist. It's got particular challenges as it comes off the bridge, sort of to the right of the picture. It sort of drops off the bridge and sort of bounces into the ballast section. So it's a vertical dip off the bridge because the trains are hammering the rail as it comes off the bridge. It's had intensive maintenance intervention. So the boys, Carl and Harpo down here at the Adelaide section, were doing a great job keeping this up. We've got spike fast second life implemented throughout the layout and through the Dargan Bridge further up. We had jacking and packing at joints very frequently. We had measured shovel packing implemented across the layout to identify the cross level and vertical dip issues. And as a result, it was approaching the end of its asset life. So up for renewal, going to go and address it. What are we going to go and do? So this is some of the images here that we've got on quite a good day in Belfast. So you can see there's sort of up in the picture there, straight towards the central station, now Lanyon Station, and then behind you towards Larne and towards Bangor. So this is one of the ones actually really lucky that we managed to find the record drawings for it. This is the layout from track work progress. I'm not quite sure. He did one of the logos off the page here. The critical thing to note here, I think, is just the custom. It's a 6.2 obtuse K crossing. You know, I don't even think a casting exists for that. I think that was a custom back in the day, and every time we needed to replace this, it was quite a large expense in order to make that 6.2 angle in the middle there. And there's some of the condition out in a bit of a wet day in Belfast. So what do we do? We've got all those problems. What are we going to do to address them? So we optimized the alignment design. So we provided a tied-in horizontal design as close as we could on either side of the bridge and the curve towards Bangor. And we implemented the design with standard geometry. So there was a little bit of a challenge in order to try and make this work. But I think in the end we got that 6.2 down to a 6.5, and we got the acute then further on the other side of the diamond down to a 5. So it was more standardized geometry with castings that we believed we could pick broadly off the shelf and amend, as opposed to maybe have to get them all as customs. We implemented the standard renewal spec for us, which is a 300 mm ballast in geotextile. So that got us a good amount of track bed designed, and managed the interface then between the back of the toes of the points and the bridge abutment adjacent. We put concrete bears throughout. Believe it or not, this was the third layout in the country that's been put on concrete. I think Moira was the first, Lurgan was the second, and this was number 3. So it's a big job for concrete bears, being quite new to us as in the Northern Ireland Railways. In order to make the specification slightly more enhanced, we specified HP rails on the switches. So we worked with Progress Rail to get the stock rails in HP, and to get as much of that sort of that low leg in the high performance steel, in order to increase the asset life. We in conjunction with our signaling department then worked to specify and implement tubular stretcher bars. So I think this is the first project that we put tubular stretcher bars on the network, to great success. All crossings were explosively depth hardened. This is a great one. I didn't even know about this one until I spoke to Lionel from Progress Rail on this. Is that they go to the beach somewhere in England, and they put Semtex on the crossings and blow them up in order to effectively work harden them. And that's a great job. We have good data to show that hardens the crossing, better than the trains would do. It keeps the crossing up, and it reduces the time between weld repairs required. So that's an absolutely great job. We're very pleased with the crossings in the end. We upgraded the specification of the IBJs, so we got 4-hole glued joints in on the turnout routes and 6-hole glued joints on the straight and where the radius would not preclude. And we got new S&C assets as well, which is always a win. So S&T utilized the possession and I think got new molded track ends, new tail cables, and maybe a new GTX or two in order to put those cables in and around the area. So if I go to the next slide, so a construction. This is quite an interesting one. So Lagan Junction was the first time Network Northern Ireland Railways has ever used a Christmas blockade. So that was one of the biggest jobs we brought Babcock in to undertake. Babcock are used to supplying staff at Christmas time, and this is the first time that it ever happened, and we were unused to paying the premium for that. That was quite a surprise. We put the S&C in through the access ramp adjacent to the site from the Sirocco works. So if you can cast your mind back to that first picture, there was an area of residential development to the right of the S&C. We built the ramp up off the side of that. I think Rob's on. He did the temporary works with the Graham contractor for that one, in order to bring the S&C up the ramp and install it. It was the first time I think we'd used the McCulloch panel lifters. So these are a great job. I've used those to lift the switches, lift the crossing panels, and I think then the guts panels we built in the hole. There's a boy Walter works for Babcock. He said it to me best. I think this is a big stupid puzzle, and the McCulloch panel lifter is certainly a good aid into putting the pieces of that big stupid puzzle together. So we built the rest of the S&C in the hold, and then we managed to get it tamped and welded and handed back on time. So that was a bit of a win for us. So I've got some limited pictures for construction here. I think my wife had my firstborn son just as this was going in, so my pictures are limited. They're not my own; they're other people's. So just give you a bit of an idea of this one here. This is the bottom ballast going in and getting rolled. This is the Sirocco work site with the ramp up on the left-hand side here. You can see, and this is the weld, and this is the hot works going on after the double junction was installed. You can see here, boys, the looks and all the new signalling assets going in. And just a bit of an idea of what that looked like then once we were finished, which is remarkably good. Can sit in the V there and look back. I tried to get a picture in the same way that we had from the existing ones, a proposed one that looked broadly the same. I think just if this does work, All night. There you go. So only 30 on the through route there, and on the way around the corner across the Dargan there, but remarkably high, very tight, and not going anywhere. That's on the concrete bars. A good job all around. So the second, and I think the last project that I have to talk to you about is that of the Belfast Transport Hub. So I just skip ahead on my notes here. So just to highlight then, so Great Victoria Street Station is a station in the centre of Belfast. It sits behind the Europa Hotel in Great Victoria Street, which as some of you may or may not know, it's one of the accolades we like to talk about every time we mention it. It's the most bombed hotel in Europe. And it's experienced a lot of issues during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. It was installed in 1995. You can see the poster that I have there on the right-hand side. That was the old NIR logo, the old rolling stock, bringing it into the centre, the heart of the city, with the European funding. You can see on the bottom right-hand side or bottom left-hand side. So the existing station was built in, however, in 2012, thereabouts. We were thinking about issues on trying to further sort of expand the station a little bit. And in 2017, there was a network utilization strategy produced by ARP, which indicated that an additional capacity in conjunction with an additional timetable would provide benefits to TransLink as an owner operator of the rolling stock. This network utilization strategy indicated that we would have an additional line from Great Victoria Street, additional S&C within the station's throat and on the approaches in order to sort trains, longer platforms in order to accommodate six car sets as well as the enterprise set and whatever enterprise replacement sets would be specified. It would cater for the enterprise because it would bring the enterprise sets into the centre of the town as opposed to stopping at Central Station or Lanyon Place where they currently do, or until last week it did, or last month it did. And it would provide future proof for OLE, which is something that we haven't got in the network just yet, but we're potentially have it at some point in the hopefully quite near future. If you have a look at this diagram, this is an old picture of Great Victoria Street Station and what we had, I think, back in the day. I think I've tried to overlay it with the new layout here, so you can sort of see if it maybe sort of align the roads there. You can sort of see what we have there. So this is the site that we're working in. This is Great Victoria Street. Sure. This is Great Victoria Street Station in here. You can see the platforms bend around the corner and go underneath the bridge. This is the road round the corner to Central Station. This is the line to Dublin. And this is a triangular junction that forms a junction between those sort of three sections. We've got Central Junction over here, City Junction to the east, and Westlink Junction to the north. And just there's Atkins Realis Belfast. That's where I would be sitting if I wasn't at home today. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what the platforms looked like, they were sort of high radius, big offsets on the platforms. Pardon me, I think sitting about 180 meter radius on the curves here. And I think those bits of rail there are there for a reason because they're getting worn so much that they're going to be replaced under maintenance quite quickly. This is a picture on the approach to Westlink Junction. You can see we've got bits of rail and half sets of S&C ready to go in. This is 781 points, which is the turnout that takes you towards Blythefield Curve to the left, and the through route takes you then towards Dublin, towards Westlink and Central Junction straight ahead there. This is experiencing a large amount of sideware on the switches, and I think the outside switch half set was being replaced probably every 6 months. It was a maintenance headache and keeping the boys in Adelaide quite busy in keeping it up. The final kind of thing to have a think about in the Belfast Transport Hub project was this. This is City Junction double junction. This is another double junction on timber, one of only two that we had. This one on Lagan Junction. Similar to 781 points, it's a high degree of curvature on the turnout road to the right. I think this is a BV switch. I think it's quite a tight switch on that right hand one going towards going along Blythefield there towards the station. So again, sort of issues with cross level, issues with gauge, and some issues with tight radius and sideware on the switches and the guts. There's just a quick another picture of it looking towards City Hospital. So this is, here are issues on the left, and here's what we're going to do about it on the right-hand side. So we've got a similar flexure turnout that was going to give bother for maintenance. What are we going to do? We're going to put a new, longer, flatter turnout in on transitional geometry, which is going to be on a straight through alignment. Similar to that then on 790, 791 points at the double junction at City Junction, we're going to remove the non-standard diamond and replace it with a single lead and remove a track in its entirety. One of the things that we highlighted on the usage of the rolling stock is that the up and down central here were only really used for empty stock movements. So it was suitable to try and get rid of the diamond crossing here at 790 points. And that's what we did. So here's the existing layout. You can see the bridges to the left at Central Junction, working in towards Westlink Junction here, and the assets that we have. So a couple of S&C units here, a couple in here, and then in the station throat, then just a couple to sort trains in and out of platforms 1 to 4. And this is the proposed layout then. We went hard with what we were going to propose here. So new S&C in the station throat for 4 tracks, 3 tracks along the Dublin line up until here at Bridge 308A. 1, 2, 3 new lines, 4 new lines into the station, each with a turnout each off the back of them, into 8 brand new platforms, which are going to be long enough on the high chainage side to accommodate the enterprise train. I think it's broadly about 220 and about 145, 150 meters, respectively, for each of them. And you can see just one of the critical challenges here, the new busway bridge that was installed and the culvert diversion that was in conjunction with the track work in this area. So you can see broadly how it looked. How it looks when we came to design this. The critical challenge for this project was the operational length of the station throat. One of the first jobs we did was draw a line from the toe of 781 points here all the way through to the buffers at Great Victoria Street, and then draw a circle with radius the same length of that line. And I think we startled the architect a little bit when the circle came out to up here somewhere because of how long the station would be due to the fact that it's on a curve. So in order to get the station in this location and tuck it in out of the way, we had to reduce the operational length quite a lot, and play some tunes on the flexibility of the S&C inside there. So we've got the double stacked S&C here, and then a crossover just tucked underneath the high numbered platforms in here, just on a little curve before we get to the low number platforms there. We had to be a little bit clever with the implementation of that. This one's a little bit of a selfish or a sort of tooting your own horn for me here. This is the track drainage sort of 3D model that I created for this. Anybody wants to talk to me about Bentley Railtrack Sorman sanitary tools for doing 3D coordination and plan profile and cross section of drainage, you can ask me a question about it later. This was great from a coordination point of view with the civils team who were looking after the culvert diversion, and also great in terms of we could actually. The software allows us to integrate with micro drainage, so I was able to export this to our colleagues who could throw some water on it and actually prove that the drainage worked or not. So just quickly, some of the project challenges. Sort of maybe mentions a highly constrained site. We were working within the confines of the red line boundary on that map that I'd shown previously, and the constraints of the Boyne Bridge to the right of the site. We had some quite long platform length requirements, which include your allowance for joining and stopping, joining and splitting, and an accurate stopping, sort of pushed them to quite a large amount. Again, we were quite clever with the solution that we proposed, and we got the radii on the taper on the platform at the ends in order to make some efficiencies and allow us to sort of angle towards the S&C a little bit earlier. We had some challenges for the platform level. Certainly, we had a flood level plus freeboard that we're working to for the platform level, and therefore a minimum level that we could go to as at the buffer ends that we needed to meet so that we could match the station concourse and also then not have issues with flooding for the water table near here. We had quite significant issues with the platform or with the track bed and the formation. So in this area here. This area here is the kind of track that's been built offline. This is all on what we call Belfast Sleech, which is, in Northern Ireland, it is as famous as London clay. It is a very, very poor, not very good material with the undrained shear strength of about 5. It has been described to me in the past as brown toothpaste. It is not very good and not very suitable for holding for holding a track bed. So as part of the design we did when I worked for Art was we specified quite a deep track bed treatment. I think it's about a meter in the end with geocells, geotextiles, sand, geoblanket, and about 300 mil of ballast. So that was particularly challenging at sort of the start of detailed design. The solution that's been implemented since during detailed design development has been to implement a sort of below formation level track slab in order to spread the load from the trains through a larger area and minimize the amount of deflection and the amount of settlement that would occur on that one. So that was quite an interesting challenge. The last couple are integration. So again, I suppose the one for this one was lots of moving parts and lots of different organizations. So I think Mott's were doing the signaling at grip 4, and Babcock were doing it at grip 5. We as ARP were sort of with track throughout the whole thing. Different project managers, different different architects. It was all a bit of a moving feast in terms of getting it integrated. But I think we did a reasonably good job in the end. And finally, then just a little bit on OLE future proofing. So in order to make sure that we weren't going to put structures in a location that was going to give bother in the future and lock in non-compliances to OLE wire heights or rail to soffit heights, we had to do a little bit of OLE design in order to make sure that we get that work. And I think we had a look at the station canopies and the interface between that and the wire gradients towards the busway bridge in order to prove that we could get the future OLE provision in here. And I'll just finish quickly on these handful of slides that I nicked from the NI Planner website. They're watermarked, but they are showing the sort of extensive construction through here. It's quite a transformative station for the centre of Belfast, and it's quite a big deal. I always look at these pictures and think it's quite extensive and quite expansive and very impressive. We don't get infrastructure projects this big very often in Northern Ireland. And so to see them go in so well is always quite encouraging. I haven't updated this slide since we have actually successfully opened and ran trains in this station, but it's needless to say it's a cracking job. I'm very impressed with it. Haven't yet been. I need to go and get a train at some point and get down the road. But it's a very good job as far as I'm concerned. I've got only a handful of slides to go, guys. We're nearly there. The last couple of things I wanted to touch on was the capitalized maintenance. So in the background then, aside from all these big projects which are delivering massive transformational work, we have a small and dedicated team of permanent way professionals who are delivering high volumes of low value work every day, midweek nights, all the way through the network. They're realizing very good benefits to value for money and keeping the rail open for the operational public. It keeps a small team mobilized with work. So they're out doing things like wet bed replacement or IBJ replacements, re-railing, and the rail management program that was undertaken by the track maintenance manager a couple of years ago, in conjunction with an ultrasonic testing regime, rail milling, and rail replacement, was a Rail Business Awards award-winning campaign and program in 2022. So doing good bits of work in sort of smaller form factors as well. What's next? Well, the capital plan for Northern Ireland Railways continues. We've potentially got some issues with funding and seeing that there's maybe slightly less work coming, but there's still plans for major renewals within Belfast. The Central Area Track Renewal Project potentially will continue. We've got a programme of works to the north in looking at the line between Ballymena and Coleraine and Derry. We are developing, and we had developed prior to when I left Translink, the concept of refurbishment, so both for S&C, level crossings, and other assets. And in conjunction with that, then they're developing the concept and mechanism of works delivery. And I'll get a shameless plug in here for Atkins Realis, and that we were successful with both of the contractors who were appointed on the Northern Ireland Railways Framework 96 Works Delivery Framework to undertake the engineering design for track on that framework. So we're hoping to see a little bit of work come from that. And finally, electrification. So you can see on the right-hand side, there is a picture from the ARP-led All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, which is detailing some of the interventions that may be required or may be necessary or suggested in the north of the island there. And you can see there's potential for scopes of work to come from this for feasibility studies, or potentially for, at the end of the day, maybe sort of actual construction work. 4 lines from Portadown to Derry, potentially one from Newry to Belfast, maybe one from Portadown to Armagh, and then potentially one of having a look at reopening the back line from Antrim to Lisburn. So there's lots of opportunity, lots of hope in the provision of infrastructure for Northern Ireland in the future. And the final one is just to touch on it before we leave, which is, this is the last slide, guys. Don't worry, is that OLE is definitely a thing. It's coming. We have professionals enroll in TransLink who are undertaking standards review and trying to think out what standards are going to be adopting and inputting into the capital plan and finding out where's best placed to undertake electrification. And we've got rolling stock, well, not being procured, but being thought about being procured, I'm sure, in order to meet the requirements for a future reduced carbon network. And I thought I would just highlight on the left-hand side there, those are TransLink's 4 Cs: continuous improvement, customer focus, climate action, and connecting communities. And I think from a railway infrastructure point of view, OLE is certainly a mechanism to meet and to give benefits to all 4 of those categories right there. And with that, I will thank you very much indeed for allowing me to babble and talk shenanigans for all that amount of time. Thank you very much indeed for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, thanks, Alastair. I certainly found that really interesting, and it's something a little bit different to what we usually have on the section. Indeed, it's actually an overseas project for us in the northwest of England here.
Yeah, technically, yeah.
Yeah,
It's only the Irish Sea, though. It's only a pond.
yeah. No, that was great. Really clear and perfect timing wise. So thank you very much. So
Oh,
yeah,
good.
I'll
I'm glad you said thanks.
Yeah, no, spot on. Yeah, much appreciated. So I'll invite members of the audience to ask any questions if you wish. You can type a question in the chat box or just unmute your microphone and ask Alastair. I'll just start off by asking one question I've got, Alastair. The transport hub project with the new station, did that land already belong to TransLink, or did they have to reacquire the land again?
There was some that did and some that didn't. So if you have a look at that, I've stopped sharing. I'm not going to go back, but there was the land in the north of the station was the existing bus terminal at the Europa station. So there was some land that belonged to TransLink, but certainly I think some that didn't. I wasn't really involved in the land liaison land purchase, but I do know that TransLink do own an awful lot of land, pardon me, railway adjacent or sort of station adjacent, in order to manage the risk that comes from potential expansion in the future. So yeah, that was a whole different thing with the states and some clever people with red lines on a map. They're trying to find where that station should go and what land should be used. I think when we were undertaking the feasibility, there was certainly a well-defined boundary for us to work within. So potentially they did prior to us starting that when I was doing the initial design for the station.
Right, thanks. Yep. Anybody else, please feel free to ask Alastair a question.
Hi, Esther. Thanks for the presentation. My question is about how the network copes with extreme weather, so sort of heavy rain, flooding, and track buckles. So how does Northern Irish Railway make the network more resilient to those challenges?
So probably starting with flooding, I think probably is one of the best ones to have a bit of a think about. That is very, very challenging. I think if you've maybe seen some of and maybe you haven't, I'm not sure that it travels very well. It's definitely local in our point of view from getting pictures in the news about certain areas of the network that have been flooding and underwater. At Portadown, which was that station that we mentioned at the end, that the new feasibility study for Portadown to Derry was being looked at. That was in adjacent to the water table, quite a high water table. Flooding occurs quite easily at sort of extreme rainfall events. And we did have, I think, in the recent past, we had somebody said there was a location case underwater in Portadown due to the volume of flooding that was over there. So in terms of the existing assets, they're all in embankment. They're not that resilient to flooding, but I would suggest that the flooding is quite extreme in that regard. We are working on it. I think there's a project currently in order to address and assess the drainage network, I think, at the minute, in order to kind of find out where it is, how suitable it is, and will it be able to sort of meet the requirements in Civ 005 for sort of, was it certain flood events and climate change. So that's flooding, and that's probably the least resilient or least good of all of the assets that we have. In terms of rail buckles and weather and other regards, rail buckles, we've in the recent past have undertaken a network-wide capital funded project for reverse testing throughout the whole network, to understand what the SFT is of all of the track within the whole network, and that is a database managed by the maintenance team, in conjunction then with quite detailed CRT records to find out where we have the highest risk for track buckles or rail breaks in the network. So we're doing quite well in that regard, and that the amount of stress on known sites has been reduced, certainly recently. And then there's volumes of maintenance work that are being undertaken to mitigate the risk on CRT in the areas that have been highlighted off the back of that project.
Cool, thanks very much.
Okay. Any more questions? I'll slip a quick one in, Alastair. Just one from me. I noticed in the slides they look like full depth switches in, I think, the ones you're showing. Do you use shallow depth switches in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I think in those switches the vintage is about 95, and the switches in the ones that are showed in the Belfast Transport Hub or the existing Great Victoria Street station. Yes, we do is the answer. Our standard spec for S&C renewal is shallow depth switches, Schwehag rollers. So that has been something I think the old track engineering manager was quite keen on, and has implemented that as the sort of de facto basic S&C renewal spec since about 2010, 12, thereabouts. So all new switches that are going in are all shallow depth on concrete. We are getting the benefit of that, and that we've got much more rail that holds our switches and increases our lateral resistance.
That's great, thanks. Okay, so we're nearly up to 5:30 now. So any more last questions before we wrap up? No, I think we're done, Alastair. So yeah, so on behalf of the Cheshire and North Wales PWI section, I'd just like to say thank you very much for giving up a little bit of your precious time to volunteer and give us this brilliant presentation. I watched this presentation before when you did it in Atkins for the Lunch and Learn session, and it just immediately stood out as a really interesting talk, and I thought straight away that would make a perfect talk for the PWI section, which is why I invited you to present it again to us, and it is much appreciated, so thank you very much. And I'd just like to say to the members of the audience, please feel free to give Alastair a virtual round of applause, which you can do using the react button at the top of your screen there. I think that'd be much appreciated, just to show our appreciation. Yeah, thanks, Alastair.
Thank you very much, everybody, for the opportunity. That was really lovely.
Yeah, thank you, and same for us. Really good, thank you. Okay, so that draws the meeting to a close. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining the meeting and showing interest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. All the best.
Thanks, Les.
Thanks. Bye, Alastair.